Welcome, friends, to Everyday Insights, where I catch up with valued colleagues and share their life learnings so we can all learn to live a little happier. This is my second podcast in my series on personal success, where I'll uncover how different people define success and how we can ever hope to attain it. Today's guest is my friend Doug Weese. We met a few years ago and bonded as our two baby sons became friends during the lockdown. Doug has an interesting past, growing up in Portland, but choosing to spend most of his adult life in Southeast Asia, only to return home to grow his family and become an influential member of the Portland business community. If you want to support one of his latest business ventures, ask for Thaiwala Thai tea in your local grocery store. So let's dive right in, and you'll learn about him planning a one-year adventure and ending up in East Asia for 14 years, starting a business in the green boom and getting into Oregon's legalized cannabis business, and taking care of a family member through mental illness and old age.
What kind of tea are you drinking?
This is black. It's probably black tea in there.
Okay.
From New Seasons from the bulk bin.
I was perusing Grace Tea's website yesterday, and they're a purveyor of fine teas.
Yeah.
And the different varieties of teas and their costs. It was like being on safari or on some exotic trip, because, you know, Chinese teas, all these different kinds, and African teas, and teas from, you know, Singapore. And
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I mean, the descriptions outdo wine descriptions. You know, it's like the pickers from the highlands in Qing Chao Chang up in the northern mountains of Taiwan, you know, cloud-filled mountains of Taiwan, you know, pick these green leaves at optimum 2 week, you know, and then hand roll them into tiny little gunpowder balls. And then I'm like, this must be expensive. So I click on like learn more, and it's like, you know, $80 for 4 ounces.
Have you ever seen those blooming teas and stuff too? I guess that must be the same idea of like hand wrapped into a certain shape and very customly done. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just getting the cheap part. You know, the bulk bin, scoop it out.
I hear you. I had African purple tea yesterday.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it, but it's a new cultivar, purposely created. And I guess it's really high in the antioxidants that purple fruit have. But the appearance of the tea is not purple. But when you pick the leaves, I guess it has a purple thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Who would have known?
Nice.
And primarily grows in one estate in Kenya or something. Yeah. Anyways, I digress.
But the tea, the leaves look purple at least? No, just nothing about it is purple except the name? Then?
They look purple when you pick them, when they're on the plant, but not by the time they get to
it's just normal tea. It's a good way to slip in, cut that tea with the regular tea. And,
yeah, right.
This is all
no, come on. The reputation's at stake.
Excellent. Let's start off with a little bit about you, and just going to tell me a little bit about your background, maybe, or for our friends out there
My bio.
listening. That's right. Yeah. Who are you, Doug? It's great to see you. Great to be here catching up with you.
You too, Ian. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. And this is my first podcast, so this is kind of exciting.
Yeah. Only my second, I guess. So
yeah. Well, let's see. I am a Portland native, and graduated Catlin class of 90, and went to college at PSU while I was working at Nordstrom's women's shoes department.
Awesome.
And then I matriculated up to University of Portland, where I started playing rugby. And then I matriculated up to Claremont McKenna in LA, where I graduated in 1996. Came back home for a little while, went to a career counselor because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my Bachelor of Arts degree in government. And the career counselor suggested I highlight the skills that I'm really good at and that I really enjoy doing with industries that complement those, which seemed like a good idea.
Yeah.
And
nice and basic.
Yeah. And
I'm not sure how that's, I know some of your next part of the story. I'm not sure how that's going to lead in, but
well, I knew at that point that whatever I was going to do, it was going to happen in San Francisco. So she was essentially helping me figure out what I was going to do in San Francisco that would complement my skill set.
Yeah.
And we decided together that advertising sounded like an exciting industry. Travel, sort of horizontally integrated, creativity, just sort of an exciting industry. And San Francisco is the West Coast center for that. And so I moved to San Francisco. I ended up getting a job in advertising. I was working for .com when it crashed.
Yeah.
Was that 2002?
Yeah, 2001, 2002.
And that was interesting because my commute to San Jose from San Francisco was an hour and a half, and overnight it became 45 minutes.
Wow. What a weird way to measure.
Calculate, measure, yeah.
Measure the
but
health of the economy.
It was real.
Yeah.
And I went back to my landlord and said, they cut my salary. You need to cut my rent. And he did. And
nice negotiation. Yeah.
It was true. The employers were, if you didn't get laid off, then you were likely to, given the choice of having your salary cut or get laid off.
Yeah.
So a lot of landlords lowered rents for tenants in the Bay Area. Anyways, around 2003, I'd come out of a longish relationship and was sort of feeling ready for the next adventure, and decided that I was going to travel around Asia on a shoestring budget for a year.
Okay. You chose a time frame and you said, I'm moving. That's what I was wondering is how you made this switch from North America to Asia continent.
I think it started because my younger brother, Alex, had recently moved to Tokyo because he wanted to learn Japanese so that he could speak with my grandma and grandpa before they passed away.
Wow.
And I had probably visited him, or at the very least, I was talking with him while he was doing it. But I think he inspired me to go to Asia.
Yeah.
And so I got one of those Air Trek, 1 year tickets where I had identified all these destinations and pre-purchased that bulk of tickets, put all my stuff in storage. And I think I left on my dad's birthday, November 21st, 2002.
Did you plan to work while you were on this year, or did you think I've got the funds to just
I planned to spend about $30 a day for a year and not work. I remember vividly flying into the old airport in Bangkok, and I had one name on a piece of paper who was a friend of a friend in advertising. Steve was the name on the paper. And I arrived, and, just the heat. And
impressive.
It was, and it was raining. It was monsoon season. I also had an article from the New York Times, Frugal Traveler, Bangkok, a week in Bangkok or whatever. So that was sort of my guide initially, from where I stayed to where I ate for the first couple of days. I remember feeling overwhelmed a little bit, but I just reminded myself that's what you're supposed to be feeling at this moment. So lean into it. Don't fight it because it's normal. Anyways, along that year, I traveled all over Asia. And because Bangkok was the center of Asia, really, both as a transportation hub and geographically, I got to know Bangkok and Thailand better than other places. It was kind of hub and spoke. And the country just started to gradually grab me and pull me in. And by about 6 months, I started entertaining the thought of staying there. And so I started looking at the classified ads in the Bangkok Post for jobs in advertising. And I was backpacking in Vietnam with a friend from Istanbul, and there was a good job ad, I think. Forget if it was Ogilvy and Mather or Saatchi and Saatchi, but it was for a media planner for, I think, Dove soap or something like that. I wasn't a media planner, but I did it early on, so I knew enough, and I wasn't really interested in Dove soap, but it was a good agency. And so
those are the big ones.
Yeah. So I sent them my resume, and they got back to me and asked if I could come in for an interview. So I told them I was in Vietnam on business. Could they wait a week? And they said, sure. So I flew back to Bangkok and had a suit made and went to the interview, and they offered me the job, which I declined because I still had 6 months left of travel. But it was this, validation of concept that I could be there and actually continue in a career as opposed to be forced to work as an English teacher. Yeah. Which there's nothing wrong with that, but I wasn't willing to do that.
Wasn't your plan for your life.
Yeah, I wasn't willing to do that. So anyways, I ended up living in Bangkok for 14 years and had a total blast.
Yeah, it's a big switch from this 1 year trip. How much time did you see your brother during that first 6 months or year? Like, did that end up being a big draw, or did you immediately found your own way and were heading off?
Alex was in Tokyo, Japan, and I was in Southeast Asia, so I didn't see him much. Yeah, maybe once. But once I lived there, we saw each other relatively often. It was a 6-hour direct flight to Tokyo, which is amazing. Yeah, compared to Portland.
Yeah, much easier. And so the time zone changes.
Yeah, minor, right. Exactly. Exactly. So he would visit me and I would visit him. And that's when we started snowboarding in Niseko, which we're going to do next week.
Wow. I imagine it's probably one of the toughest parts of changing countries, changing continents like that is your, leaving family or, leaving all the friends and all the connections you have and starting fresh like that, which I guess I've moved cities and moved around the US and kind of lost those connections a few times myself. But I think it's, I don't know, I think you probably did it at a whole nother level. And so it's interesting to hear how you came in thinking your brother was one important touch point of you drawing you there. But then you created your own network, or how did that happen?
When I think of you, Ian, I think of how you have a tight family unit and your closeness to your mom and your brothers and everything. With my family, it was a little bit different because my mom, suffered from mental illness a lot of her life, and my dad passed away when I was only 16. And so after he was gone, her illness our family life became a little turbulent. So the attraction of staying near my mom.
You're looking for a way to get out?
Right. It was more of a repelling force.
That's funny.
So, there wasn't, because I know lots of people would rather stay close to family, which is a wonderful thing, but
or your friends too. I think one thing I think about you is that you have a lot of friends that you've had your entire life.
Yeah.
You make connections and you keep them for the rest of your life, which is, I'm interested to hear how you do that more too later, but,
they were doing their own thing. They weren't in San Francisco. Yeah. For starters, or somewhere, but, anyways, I felt pretty footloose and fancy free. It was really nice having my brother close by. And I did have friends from the States, my closest ones, they all came to visit
occasionally and stuff.
Sometimes more than once. Yeah. And my mom came out once when I did a executive MBA program there. Mm-hmm. It was a local university in partnership with Kellogg and Wharton. And so my mom came out for the graduation ceremony, Thai graduation ceremony. I received the diploma from one of the princesses.
Awesome.
Yeah, I had to do the proper walk and not look in the eyes and, all this bizarre formality.
Yeah. That reminded me of one question I wanted to ask about Thai culture. So I know you moved on from there to working with some different kinds of businesses. One of them was a pet supply business, kind of like pet technology
that
stuff.
That was my wife's company, Pet Protect.
Yeah.
But I helped her get it started.
What are the biggest cultural differences you saw between, living there, living here?
Particularly in business, you know, the U.S. corporate culture is sort of that vaunted Jack Welch efficiency, hit your goals, take initiative. Asia is very different than that. It's sort of a hierarchical culture, at least Thailand, but I think other Asian cultures are too.
Yeah.
Where you have deference to your boss and you do what you're told. And if you're not told to do something, you probably are not going to spend a lot of energy to come up with, you know, a better idea. And then there's something called losing face, which is basically you don't want to put anyone on the spot and embarrass them. That's a big no-no. And I think Asian cultures, definitely in Thailand. So it was interesting and challenging, and I had to learn how to motivate Thai employees, particularly this was a medical device company called Pacific Medical.
Was that your first job then out of grad school there? Or what? Yeah, how did that flow go?
My first job after grad school was a company called Vector Technology, and we were basically a franchise of a Istanbul business that did GPS tracking, telematics for trucking fleets. So I did that for five years, I think. And then I started a new business called Pacific Medical. And that was selling orthodontic equipment that was manufactured in McMinnville, Oregon, about 45 minutes from here.
A connection you had, or just random that it was happened to be Oregon stuff?
I happened to be flying home from Bangkok in the winter, maybe 2006 or 7, when there was a big ice storm and our plane, PDX was shut. So our plane was diverted to SFO, and they put us in hotels and told us to come back the next day at 5 a.m. in case a window of flight opened up and they could get us back to Portland. And the only thing that was open at SFO at 5 a.m. was the bar. So I sat next to the president and CEO of World Class Technology, which is the manufacturer of these orthodontic products. And we started talking. And one thing you'll notice in Bangkok is how many dental clinics there are. Thais are just very focused on their aesthetics. And so I shared this with Rolf, the owner. And fast forward, I opened a business around that.
Yeah, amazing. So then you were telling the story initially of motivating your team.
Yeah, so
business,
you can't be too direct like Americans are with Asians and with Thais. And so in order to get a Thai employee to achieve an objective, I would have to sort of build a framework around the objective without actually saying what it is so that they could identify what the objective is on their own, claim it as their own, and then I would encourage them to go get it. And it was kind of a roundabout way of doing things, but it was a lot more effective than me saying, here's your sales target, this is what you got to do, or just giving them an objective and then letting them use their toolkit to do it.
Yeah.
The
sales target thing seems like an interesting example, or maybe you can walk me through one of how that would happen. But the sales target being, hey, you got to go sell X, go figure it out. Go, figure out what you need to do it, and let me know if I can help eliminate barriers.
Right.
But so instead of doing that, do you have a good example of how you did this motivation?
It really depended on the task, but it would just be like, or we really need to get this done so that we can put the advertisement in the magazine. We want the doctors at the trade show to know about this promotion. What do you think the right strategy is?
Yeah. So that does sound empowering. Like you're trying to empower them to come up with the idea of what to do next.
And then, you help guide them to it.
So when you empower them like that, they might come up with an idea you don't like. How do people handle, or have you found even just throughout your career, people handling that rejection?
I think life's about building relationships, even at work. So you do it constructively, and you talk about it, and you talk about your reasons for it. And if the other person's reasonable, then hopefully you guys arrive at the same conclusion.
Yeah. That's most of your time in Thailand, and then you decided to come back to the U.S.
So I was dating B, who's my wife, and I was starting to realize that maybe we'd get married. And I always thought in my mind that when it was time to start a family, that would be in Portland.
The draw of home to you, or something.
The draw of home, yeah, childhood memories, and just Portland being such a incredible town and such a healthy place to live. So I started strategizing on how to get home, running.
Yeah. What do you mean running?
Well,
running towards get there fast? Or?
No, like hit the ground running.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Without losing
not
your career
like running out of town. That was Cambodia. No, I'm kidding. How to hit the ground running. So that was another exciting time, and again, it was about place, choosing a place and then figuring out the strategy to get there and achieve your objectives, be successf出.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with Bangkok. It was the same thing with San Francisco. Same thing coming home to Portland.
Yeah.
So I can't remember how the idea came up, but a friend I've known since lower school, I think, mentioned cannabis, and cannabis was about to go legal in the U.S. So I started coming up with a business strategy with these three guys in Portland. I was still in Bangkok, but we would do, videos, and we had conference calls with Stolry corporate lawyers, and I was doing it all from Bangkok. But it got to the point where I felt comfortable moving back to Portland on my own, that I would have enough of a start, enough of a direction, that if I moved back home, I could try and make it real. It wasn't anything yet.
Yeah. You didn't have an investor or anything yet.
No, we had a business plan, but it wasn't much. And so I flew back in, I think, September 2016. I flew directly to LA for a big cannabis trade show. And I met up with the three guys from Portland. I think we crashed. At that time, my brother was in LA. So we crashed at his place. And for the next 3 years, I worked on that company while B stayed in Bangkok. She stayed because she had her Pet Protect company that was doing well, and her friends and her gym and her life. And I didn't have a whole lot in Portland. And I was so laser focused on trying to get the company Rare Air off the ground. And then on top of that, B started her green card application, and the way we did it required her to be out of the country while I was in the country. Got married despite being separated for 3 years.
Yeah, that's not easy. Big decision. And big decision for her too, to make that transition between countries and everything.
It was.
I'm sure it's been challenging.
I think she probably had grave doubts that we would get back together when I left for Portland to work on the cannabis business. But we talked on FaceTime. The time zone was almost opposite. So my morning, her evening, her morning, my evening.
Yeah.
So we talked twice a day on FaceTime. And then we met in Italy once. I flew to Bangkok, like once a year, maybe a couple other times. But yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, I'm sure that was nice to end that period as well. So overall, all the time you've been around here, like, what do you consider your biggest success or biggest successes? When I say that, what comes to mind first?
I guess living and working in different places around the world, places where I wanted to explore.
Yeah. Was that a childhood dream kind of?
No, not really. When I left for backpacking in Asia, I did not intend to stay 14 years in Thailand.
Yeah.
I almost have to reflect back on things to try and look for a pattern, but the the obvious pattern in my life was moving to live somewhere that appealed to me, whether it was San Francisco or Bangkok or Portland. And then the challenge that followed that move in order to be successful, which, you know, I think means being fulfilled. So when I decided I was going to move to any of those places, I really didn't have a lead on anything or anything secure. And that required a laser-like focus on the project at hand. So in San Francisco, it was start a career in advertising. In Bangkok, it was find a good job that would lead to better opportunities. Avoid being an English teacher, right? But,
Yeah.
you know, that led somewhere. And then in Portland, it was start this company, Rare Air. And there's a thrill when you have that clarity and focus, and there's nothing else you've got to accomplish, and there's no strings attached, and you're your own person. Mm-hmm. And so that being able to have achieved something in San Francisco, in Bangkok, in Portland, for me, that's one form of success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned the idea of success meaning fulfillment. What is that? What does it mean to be fulfilled, or how do you get fulfillment?
I think the older you get, the more it distills down to having loving relationships. And the younger you are in your career, the more it is about job titles and achievements and, you know,
some sort of external measure or external
I think so.
Approval of success?
To a certain degree. You want to get that promotion when the other people around are doing it. You want to, you know, nail that presentation, and you want to show that you've got the goods, right?
So you guys came here and you had a baby. You have a 3-year-old, and you mentioned family as
that is success.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
That's fulfillment. But relationships take work.
Yeah.
Always, I think, take work. You have to invest in them, your time and your effort. Mm-hmm. It's like growing a plant or something. And as you know, with a 3-year-old, that's a lot of work, loving work, but it's a lot of work. But that's been amazing. I mean, you know, seeing him grow up and seeing Ian Jr. grow up, it's a one-of-a-kind experience.
Yeah, you said how, you know, over time you've felt that shift of titles and doing the right presentation to being more of a family-oriented success feel. How does that
or at least
look now?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. I mean, there's part of me that still wants other people to recognize that I've got, you know, accomplishments.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ends, except maybe in hospice or something. But at the same time, though, I think with age does come wisdom. You see what your better self can be, and you work towards it. And it's hard to change, but that's not a reason not to try. Yeah. It's a work in progress, you know. For me, getting bored is a problem. When I get bored, I lose focus. And I've always put myself in a situation where I'm always learning. When I stop learning, I get bored. And when I get bored, I'm not productive.
Mm-hmm. So what have you taken up? You know, your quests for learning, how has that flowed over the last, I don't know, 5 years or so?
Well, when I came back to Portland with Rare Air, I really had to raise, in starting the business, I had to bring my entrepreneurialism to a higher level in order to raise $3 million. I had to elevate my fundraising, and I had to elevate my financial modeling to build a business case for people to invest in my vision. I hired people to help me learn how to do that at that level. You know, Excel spreadsheets and present value discounting and cash flow waterfalls and debt and senior debt and junior debt and all these things, which I've learned in the last 5 years, have been very exciting for me to understand and use. And fundraising strategies and cohorts and pitches and psychology behind it has been exciting for me. I feel like it's the natural evolution of my career, and it all happened because I decided to come back to Portland.
Some people would think about going to business school, or would think a lot of those things you just mentioned, maybe you should have learned or they should learn in school. How is it different, things you're learning in real life or on the job as we grow older, than what you learn through school?
Mm-hmm. Well, my undergrad is a liberal arts education. So I suppose the arguments I learned how to think. And I focused on government. So I learned about government. The executive MBA was part-time. So it was Wednesday evening and all day Saturday for 2 years. And you get sort of a high-level managerial understanding of the topics taught in business school.
Yeah.
But you don't go in deep. Mm-hmm. The idea being that you would have employees that would actually do the books, but you better know how to read the books, that kind of thing.
And why you need to do them, or what's,
exactly
what's
how
the
to
value
read
that
them
they're
and
providing.
What's the value, and how to spot problems in the books, or that kind of thing. So all of that was really good for me. Executive MBA, they want you to have 8 years work experience before you start, so that you have real life business perspective that you can apply to what you're learning in the classroom. And so it was good. It was really good. But the skills I needed for rare air required more detail than I had learned in school. But it wasn't because there was any omission or anything like that. I knew.
Yeah, I'm not trying to place blame, more
Yeah.
show the value of learning continuously.
It helped bring me to a situation where I knew what needed to be done, and I knew how to reach out to people who knew how to do those things and help me do them. To be honest, I didn't really need to learn how to do giant spreadsheets and modeling, but I wanted to. So I got into the weeds a lot. No, but it all built upon itself to get me to where I was with rare air. And one thing I'll do if I'm in a situation, if I can identify an area of weakness or an area that I can't do, then I'll go shine a light on that and try and turn that into a strength. So it was a real learning experience for that company. And it was great, even though it didn't work out in the end.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear the wind down process. That's one side of success, is failure, or is just the change, things moving on, or like whether it's a failure or not, or a success or not. That's the kind of things we're evaluating in ourselves and evaluating in our lives. And it's difficult to do.
Yeah, the life is definitely challenging. It's hard to stay even keeled. I remember when I was starting to think about winding down, I was starting to feel more anxiety than I normally felt on a daily basis. B was, in Thailand
and planning to come soon at that point,
so.
or like, you might have been.
So.
It always happens at the same time.
There was just a lot of balls in the air,
Yeah.
And work was getting a little stressful, and so it's important to observe yourself and make sure that you're doing okay too.
Yeah. So what happened with that, and how do you feel about it now? What's the learning we can take from doing that startup business, which I think is exciting for a lot of people. And then
it is exciting.
You feel some great success getting that started up, and then it changes over time.
In the case of rare air, the Oregon cannabis industry between 2016 and 2019 had so many convulsions and was roiled so many times by different events. By 2019, the big story was the overwhelming number of producer licenses of growers, resulting in a massive glut. And so the price of cannabis was almost nothing. And the OLCC temporarily suspended issuing new grower licenses. And so we were in line to receive ours. And we were also in line to start construction on a $2 million facility in Boring, Oregon. And so you can't build a facility if you don't have a license to do anything.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I realized that in the end, our business model was underfunded. And if I were to do it over again, rather than just decide, okay, I don't need 3 million, I need 10 million to do this, and our model was to be vertically integrated, I think I would have, on a second chance, I would have focused on building a brand, Rare Air, so cannabis based on heirloom and landrace seeds and strains, original strains, pre-hybrid and pre-all the craziness. Built just an incredible story about that, and outsourced the growing, the distribution, the processing, all of it.
Not done the vertical integration.
Yeah, just built a brand. And no one's done that yet about heirloom landrace. I still think it's a good opportunity. But it was such an adventure. I mean, 2 good stories. One is I wanted to build a brand for Rare Air, and I came from the advertising industry. And so I knew that you could find young creatives who sometimes would work for free to be part of something cool. So I cold called Wyden Kennedy, and the young lady there is like, well, she said, I do know one guy who's interested in cannabis or whatever. I'll share your idea with him. And so this creative director got in touch with me, and I said, I'm creating this cool brand, Landrace Heirloom. We've got a piece of land. And he's like, I'd love to. So we had a creative director from Wyden Kennedy, one of the top agencies in the creative agencies in the world, work for us for free.
Wow.
And then another exciting story, which was bad. Our grower, who was a business partner, a minority business partner in terms of his ownership. So the idea of the heirloom and landrace came from him originally. And he had a bunch of seeds that he had collected over the years of these heirloom and landrace.
What is that second part? Land race?
Land race. It just means indigenous. So if you go to the island of Koh Chang in Thailand, herb grows indigenously, natively, and it's Koh Chang seeds. If you go to the Rio Negro in Colombia River, there's Rio Negro landrace herb.
Okay.
And then heirloom, so.
I guess you could define it though for us.
Well, just heirloom is kind of original strains before they've been hybridized.
Yeah, because I feel like heirloom tomatoes were one of the first things that came out.
Yes,
it's like
right.
Like organic was originally, it didn't really mean anything. Then the USDA came in and said, organic means this specific kind of thing. And some people get upset about that. I feel like heirloom might be another one of those terms that's not controlled as what it really means.
I think that the theory is that heirloom have their own characteristics that you don't really get in mass marketed produce anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So whether or not that's true, but I think that's
marketing
the theory.
term at least. Yes.
I think that's the theory.
All right. So heirloom.
Anyways, so we had hired this investment coach or a fundraising coach to help us. And so we were meeting at a coffee shop to build a pitch for investors. And I remember a moment where the coach, we're telling about our heirloom landrace idea. And the coach turned to Mike and was like, you are really the key of this story, of this brand. It is you.
The grower.
Yeah. And I turned and I was like, oh man, he's going to really think that he's the key.
Yeah.
And the company.
Then,
and
sure enough, the power change there.
Sure enough, he came back and he told me that he was going to need a lot bigger ownership of the company. And the truth is, you can get these seeds anywhere and you can find there's already people growing. Everyone's an incredible grower.
Yeah.
Right. But it was just as soon as this dumbass coach said that, I wanted to punch the coach.
Yeah.
I was like, and I knew this journalist guy. I was like, I knew this guy doesn't know shit. So we had weeks of intense negotiations. Another aspect of the cannabis industry was nobody really has a business background, but they're all experts, right? It was the green rush.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the grower was just asking for all this crazy stuff, and I gave more a little bit, but, it just wasn't realistic. And so that was just sort of another nail in the coffin at the time. I gave him back his investment. He gave me all the seed bank. And yeah, that was that.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you feel about it all now? How would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 for success, in your life? Was this the fact that you went off and did this big project?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, it ended in failure in the sense that the company didn't get started. However, it allowed me to come to Portland after being gone for 25 years and hit the ground running, getting to know lawyers, getting to know consultants, getting to know investors, going to trade shows. And for 3 years, I was able to do that.
Yeah.
Never a moment of, sitting at home in a rainy day, wondering, feeling the anxiety of, did I make the right decision, or what am I going to do next? So in that sense, it was perfect. It led to where I am today.
Yeah.
Like a good spot.
Yeah. Awesome. Maybe we could talk a little bit about how relationships have influenced you through those processes, how they shape our path to success. So who are the people along the way, either through maybe this Oregon timeframe or through the Thailand timeframe? How did people come in and out of your life that helped you to feel success?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I said, I was 16 when my dad died. So when he died, one of my best friend's fathers stepped into the void the same day, actually, and said, I'll be your new dad,
Wow.
Not take over for your dad, but, I'm here for you.
Yeah, that's really nice.
And so, I think I've always been attracted to like older men in terms of the wisdom and just the friendship that they can bring. And I forgot to mention, when my dad died and I was 16, he was 77. So that's also why older guys, that was my dad. He was
Yeah, he was very old. Yeah.
So in business, I think it's very important to find mentors, people who can teach you what they know and teach you how to avoid mistakes, share what they've gained through their hard work, so that you can be good at what you do. And I've been lucky from time to time to have people like that.
How do you find a mentor? I think that's been a challenge for me in life, or in finding those people, switching it from being a person you've met to, oh, I'm going to consider you a mentor.
Yeah. Obviously, there has to be chemistry. There has to be a connection. And then there has to be relationship building. And a mentor doesn't need to be someone you see every week. A mentor could be someone you check in with once a month, but that when you have questions, you can go to them for advice.
Yeah. Do you find it valuable for that to be like a formalized relationship, or do you just think of it as there's just people Friendship. And I think of them as someone I'm looking up to?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think almost looking up to is, the keyword's mentor, but it's just someone I look up to and I trust, and whose advice I value.
What's the flip side of that? Are there relationships that have been detractors, or how do you identify someone that is like negative towards your feeling of success, or to you getting to the next level of success when you're doing something?
I can't think of anyone that was adversarial or negative like that. I can think of being in a work situation or any relationship situation that's not going anywhere, right? Or it's unsatisfying. And then inertia sits in. It's hard to make a change. And so you end up treading water or maintaining that less than ideal situation.
It's more your personal demon than an external relationship.
Yeah. I've done it, and I think other people do it. You can do it for a long time, years sometimes. So that's more in my experience than having someone who's keeping me down or something like
some
that.
sort of toxic personality.
I've seen that. I mean, I worked for a .com in San Francisco for about 6 months. It was a toxic sort of Wall Street trading floor, hyper aggressive. 4 young guys, you know, ringing the cowbell when they close a deal. And, you know, it's just like really a .com San Francisco cliche. And I lasted a couple of months and then I quit.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this kind of stress will give you cancer.
Yeah, not the right culture for you. or maybe for anyone. So, yeah, recently your mom you moved her to a new memory care facility, and I was interested in just how that whole process, I mean, I think it's something we all have to deal with, is our loved ones getting older and, you know, taking care of them. And it's really a super big challenge for people.
We've learned along the way, because my mom has struggled with mental illness. We've been dealing with this for a long time. Probably 15, 16 years ago was when she left sort of living independently and moved to assisted care living facility. I was in Bangkok and I got a call in the middle of the night, and it was a social worker, a state social worker in Oregon, saying that my mom had been picked up in the lobby of a downtown hotel. She was sleeping on the couch, and she was at the Good Samaritan psychiatric ward. And did I know? And I was like, obviously not. You know, you called me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And he's like, well, you know, this isn't the first time. I mean, we knew she was struggling, but this isn't the first time. And either you or, you know, a family member needs to come and take control of her situation, or the state will do it. And you don't want that. And he's like, I can give you the name of an elder care law attorney, and she can help guide you through the process. So there are resources out there for getting old and the challenges of involved with that, whether it's mental health or anything else. There are a lot of resources. So we hired an elder care law attorney. She told us that we would need to file for a healthcare guardian. So a guardian is someone who has legal authority to make healthcare decisions for someone else. So she did that for us, and we interviewed guardians and selected one.
Just someone local, or what does that mean? Like they're not related, or could they be someone related?
They could be, but in our case, we are not trained to be guardians, nor are we trained to deal with mentally ill people. So out of the goodness of our heart, if we try and take care of my mom, we're making our own lives miserable, and we're likely preventing her from getting the best help she can get. So through the goodness of sons' hearts, you're actually screwing everyone over.
So the guardian was a real caretaker, not just making decisions about it.
Not a caretaker, just a healthcare decision maker.
Wow. Okay.
So if, you know, medicine, she would have to approve it. You know, hospital, she would go make sure that everything's okay.
Nice. So
we hired a guardian, and then the question was, where is she going to live? So my brother and I went and looked at a bunch of assisted care living facilities around town. And we chose Roschnitzer Manor in Raleigh Hills. It's a Jewish place, so you have for-profit and nonprofit facilities. And we ended up going with a religious one. They seem to have their hearts in the right place at that time. And so she moved in there. And so now she's in a community with a nurse station where she can eat on her own, you know, and they provide support.
Yeah.
And then there's a guardian in place who, if anything happens, the guardian steps in, and Alex and I can just be her sons.
Yeah.
We don't have to deal with the stress of it.
And you were both abroad still at that point, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although my brother at some point came back to LA, so he was closer.
Yeah. But the guardian does seem important in that case for sure, to have someone who's can make a decision within a few minutes or within an hour.
Yeah. And just oversee my mom's medical because she couldn't do it on her own.
Yeah.
The facility it's a safe facility and there's nurses, but my mom wouldn't say it's time for my psychiatrist appointment or I need to see a psychiatrist, right? And take your own medication. Most mentally ill people don't think they're ill. They try and convince you it's real, right? And so someone's got to administer that medicine.
Yeah.
It's not easy growing old, but we've been lucky that we've found the right folks to help and that we can afford it. I kind of shudder to think about growing old in this country if you don't have the means to afford it. These places can be pretty spendy.
Yeah.
And so, last week we moved her to Touchmark, which is a for-profit old folks project, and the memory care. And there we hired a guy named Peter Wilhelm, whose job it is to help you select a new memory care facility. So he's a broker, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So we told him we need it to be not too far from our home. It's got to look great. It's got to be a greenhouse model where the rooms are on the outside and they look into this common area. And he's like, here's a list of 4 names that I think you'll be really happy with.
Any word on how that transition goes for her?
I mean, knock on wood, but it seems to be going really well. The level, because she was at assisted care, which isn't much assistance. And so now she's in memory care where everything is done. Everything is that, bathing and getting in bed and socializing and laundry. So it's sort of a revelation.
Yeah. Well, good luck to her and you guys too. Hopefully it turns out great. So I mentioned earlier this idea that one thing I notice you being particularly good at is you make these relationships, you have friends, you keep them over a long period of time, and that you're still friends with some of the same people you do from Catlin Gable or from, different points in your life. How do you manage that? How do you keep in touch with these people? Or I find in my own life and what I'll go through in this podcast, and I've met a lot of amazing people throughout my life from lots of different places, but I'm not so great at keeping in touch with all of them. And that's part of the value of this is hopefully I'll get to spend more time with everybody.
I think it just takes a phone call.
Yeah.
It just takes making contact every couple months. That's it.
Yeah. So no formal process for you or anything, or do you have
No, but it's important to me, and I do consider these are people I like, and I feel are important in my life, that I'm better for having them in my life. So in that sense, the most important thing you can do is to say hi once in a while. That's it.
What about the double-sidedness of that? People could call you or you could call them.
Well, I think you pointed out already, that seems to be a strength of mine.
Yeah.
Reaching out.
Yeah. So you don't feel bad, like if you're the one doing the work on all that stuff,
no,
I'm going to make the phone calls.
I don't. It's valuable to me. I feel the benefit from doing that. Yeah. It's self-sustaining activity.
Yeah. Do you set aside time on your calendar? Do you have any formalization to that kind of thing? Or are you just like, I got a few moments here. Let me call up.
Suddenly I'm feeling chatty.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, I'll give Ryan a call or, Bill or whomever.
Yeah.
It just takes reaching out. There's no shortcut or substitute from just checking in.
Yeah. What about finding partners? I think that's an interesting topic. There's two ways you could take that question, whichever one feels better for you. So one is, how do we find a good relationship? You found B through all that time out in Thailand, and you said, oh, this is the one for me. I'm going to, do this difficult 3-year relationship from afar. Or then like with Rare Air, you found business partners there, and with your other businesses now and in the past, you're selecting out these business partners. And how do you choose what's going to be a successful relationship there versus a difficult one?
In both cases, partnerships are tough. Just relationships are hard. In the business case, if you can survive without having partners, or if you can be successful without having partners, at least in the sense of check signing partners and corporate paper partners and things like that, It's nice to have ultimate say. Partnerships often end up not working because situations change. So yeah, sometimes it can be simpler not having partners. But as you pointed out, I've always had them. But I feel like as I've gained more and more experience,
Trying to do more with less.
yeah, a little bit, you can attract smart people around you without necessarily giving up control of the company. And with regards to relationships, well, I got married, I was 45. So that tells you, that says something. I'm not sure what.
You had a lot of experience figuring it out.
I'm sort of a tortoise in that sense. I don't know. In my case, I felt more ready to settle down to a single person, to being responsible and more selfless, less selfish around the age of 45. Before that, the idea of committing your everything to one person, it was like, oh, I'm not ready for that. And so, about that time where I felt more ready to make that sort of commitment was, I was with B. We were having a really good time and very compatible. So it seemed like the natural evolution of the relationship. Having said that, B and I dated 10 years before we got married.
Wow. Yeah. So you knew her pretty well by that point.
For me, it was just a confluence of different things, external, internal, life, moving. It came down to, okay, you have to make a decision now.
Your story is typical and atypical, right? We all go through these same kind of life issues, and everyone does it a little bit differently. So it's just fun to hear about those stories and learn from them, and we can all make our own choices with those ideas in mind. Thanks a ton for sharing yours today, and best of luck.
With your thanks trip for having me on, and this has been fun.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Doug.
All right.
That's it for today. Thanks a ton for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time, friends.